make it clear.
Order. I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we rank the week's current affairs with the best political team on television. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my ever-revolving panel of bloggers and opinion shapers, she is with Indigenous rights movement Idle No More, commentator and blogger Marama Davidson. And she is from New Zealand's largest feminist blog, The Hand Mirror, commentator and blogger Julie Fairey. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, Jackie Blue as the new EEO Commissioner. Is it only equal employment opportunities if you are a mate of the National Party? Issue 2, marriage equality is a reality. Has society finally become egalitarian? And issue 3 tonight, John Key claims the GCSB needs to spy on us because someone tried to hack New Zealand for weapons of mass destruction. When should we hand over our civil liberties? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. A raft of appointments has hit the Human Rights Commission. Political homophobe Brian Neeson, former National Party candidate Ravi Musuku, and ACT Party hardman Ken Shirley joined Susan Devoy and now Jackie Blue. Is this jobs for the mates, and where is the meritocracy? Julie, as an MP, Jackie Blue stopped pay equity reviews in public sector, cut training incentive allowances for sole parents, reduced targets for equal representation of women on state board sectors, state sector boards, and voted against extending paid parental leave. In terms of equal employment opportunities, Jackie Blue almost makes Susan Devoy look overqualified, doesn't she?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Jackie handles the role because, as you've pointed out, she has taken political positions by virtue of being an MP in the very recent past, including last night.
That's right.
And she will continue to do that up until June, and suddenly she has to switch into the role of being an independent advocate. I actually have had a bit to do with Jackie locally, and I have quite a bit of time for her, but I think the manner of this appointment does her no favours, gives her no credibility and semblance of independence. She's come out this morning and said she's concerned about gender balance in Parliament. By leaving Parliament, she's actually making it slightly worse because she's going to get replaced by a male National MP. Her party are the worst perpetrators of a gender imbalance in Parliament.
So how much credibility does she bring to the role when she has a history of voting with the National Party that's actually done quite as much as it can to reduce those equal opportunities?
I think she has got some good history in the health debate.
Yep.
She's got, and to be honest, I sometimes wonder what she got out of a parliamentary career when she was getting a lot out of her medical career, particularly in regards to advocacy around breast cancer. But she's also done a lot of work around Pacific women's health throughout the Pacific. And I understand from Lewis Wall that she's actually done some really good work there. So I feel that she may well have the skills, but the problem is, in the context of the Devoy appointment, the other ones that you've mentioned, the fact she's an MP now and she's leaving to do this, it's all a bit whiffy and it doesn't do her any favours.
Within medicine, she may have those credentials and that credibility with those communities, but in terms of equal employment opportunities,
it doesn't appear to be immediately transferable.
Marama, you saw Susan Devoy's media performance on Native Affairs and Campbell Live this week. If we're looking at these appointments, is New Zealand getting its $200,000 worth out of Susan at the moment?
Absolutely not. It's not just $200,000 worth plus in terms of salary. There is travel around the world and domestic travel. Over those 5 years, there are a lot of expenses involved in her position that aren't just included in the salary. And so I don't believe we're getting someone who is at all informed and can articulate. As we saw on Campbell Live, she struggled with the word structural discrimination, not just because she had to learn it very quickly in the recent future, but because it's not in her soul and she doesn't understand what that is about. So we're getting someone who's basically starting from behind scratch. And it's not just her salary that is being used. She is pulling on the capacity of an amazing, incredible, talented team who are skilled and experienced, but a lot of their employment, full-time FTE, is going to go towards her upskilling. I think it's a real shame that we couldn't put someone in there who has that understanding and can get onto the ground and can lead from the front, because she's actually being led, she's being coached, and my full sympathy to the Human Rights Commission, who obviously in the interviews just this week, they tried their hardest, but she did come across as rote learnt, like it was a script, and I certainly think that many New Zealanders were not convinced that she even believes what she is saying at this rate.
Isn't this actually, in a perverse kind of way, a wonderful example of equal employment opportunities? Here you have a person woefully underqualified to be able to actually do the job, being given a chance.
Listen, I'm actually going to be a little bit charitable if I also think about Jackie Blue, and I'm going to say New Zealand is a relatively small country. At some point we may be looking to our circles to employ people who are the best for the job, but it does come back to the merits of the job. Now the definitions for being able to succeed in these commission roles successfully are very clear. People have actually tagged the left for saying, oh, well, you're just disappointed because it is now a partisan appointment for the National Party, whereas it was for the Labour or what have you. Actually, it shouldn't be partisan. What it should be is about appointing someone who is around human rights and social justice. If we look at Jackie Blue, I'm going to maintain myself as a naive inquirer and not knowing much about her, and the benefit of that is being able to say, can she have an ingrained understanding of inequity to even be able to promote equality in the first place?
Julie, when is political appointment cronyism and when is it meritocracy? And does the public really care? I mean, John Key has rung his old school chum, given him the position of the director of the GCSB, doesn't seem to be harming him.
It's actually, I'm really glad you put this on the agenda, the cronyism issue, and I looked up on No Right Turn, which is an excellent blog, to see he's got a category for cronyism, and I started reading them to see how many there had been, and I ran out of time. But we've got Fletcher, we've got Collins has made 3 appointments just recently, Devoy, Blue, and also Robert Key, who's a close friend of her husband. He's now the Director of Proceedings for Human Rights. They just appointed Belinda Vernon to something. We've got the whole Sky City stinky mess there. And when they reinstated Queen's Counsel as a title, the first person they gave it to, Chris Finlayson, their own MP who's the Attorney General. Now, there's a whole raft of this going on, and at some point surely it has to stretch the credibility. The argument that, but Labour did it too, well, for a start, I think it's a false equivalence. I think when you look at, and I think the Race Relations Commissioner is a really good case in point. Those people all clearly had the skills.
Right.
You know, there weren't concerns in the sector of this is someone who's been parachuted in who has no credibility.
So the difference is when, and I think it's a fair point to make, when Labour have, and they are political appointments, we understand that, but the political appointments that Labour have made did actually reach some level of meritocracy threshold, didn't they?
Yeah, and also to say that, well, they did it so we can do it too, that's not good enough. Aren't we supposed to be making the world a better place? Isn't that what politics is all about?
Yeah.
So just dismissively saying Labour did it so we can do it, well, for a start, you're doing it a whole lot worse than Labour did it. And secondly, shouldn't you be trying to do it better?
Marama, if you are the government, you get to appoint who you like, why should we be concerned about this?
Because we can't take, there is not a lot of faith and goodwill, I believe, from this government, and that has shown itself across a range of approaches, policies and law going before us today. I mean, there's just the list. We don't have time in the whole year for this list. So unfortunately we do have to be strong and call them to account on so many different things.
Question to both of you, as National continue the blitzkrieg attack on civil liberties, should we be concerned that our human rights watchdog is actually being appointed into a lapdog? I mean, this is the problem, is it not? If you've got a complaint about civil liberties, it goes to the Human Rights Commission. Oh, lo and behold, it's stacked with people who may be woefully under resourced to be able to do the job. And
it's that lack of empathy and compassion, isn't it? And I think I would really appreciate if somebody would do some analysis now of what we're looking at as a whole picture of the Human Rights Commission, because I know people who have worked for the Commission like Marama and also people who work for them now who are amazing and who I would have a lot of faith in. But what is the impact these appointments are going to have on the whole organisation, and how long is it going to be before actually it saps the organisation?
If you're a young queer person, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and you had an issue going in front of the Human Rights Review Tribunal right now that Brian Neeson sits on, would you question the validity of the decision coming out of that?
Listen, this is where I always go back to the staff having to take up the flak for any leadership, and the skilled, genuine and sincere compassion and passion for everything that they do, the relationships that those people on the ground have in those, say for example, transgender and queer communities is absolutely essential. They are being hammered with appointments that do not lead them in a progressive direction.
So concerns?
I have huge concerns.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, marriage equality has finally become a reality, with our country becoming the 13th to legalise gay marriage. Has New Zealand society finally become egalitarian, and what are the next steps? Can I just firstly get from both of you your feelings and your impressions from last night?
Oh, ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic that this, you know, it's taken too long, but we try not to dwell on that, and we look forward to going forward from this important landmark.
Any dry eyes in your household?
I have to admit, I only cried when Grant spoke. But it was really wonderful also to wake up this morning and know that, and to see all the Facebook and tweets and everything, people celebrating, and I just thought, yeah, this is, I have like-minded friends and this is awesome.
Marama, when you consider our terrible gay youth suicide rates, will this law change give them the legitimacy of their lifestyle that they're sadly lacking at the moment?
Listen, this is one step, a hugely important and symbolic step, but I hope that it's starting to change our language as a nation, and it's starting to change our, not just our acceptance, but embracing who people are, not just tolerating people.
Yeah.
So, and I think the conversations are out there in the public, and I think we can start to now really grab onto the far more progressive kōrero that says our young people need to be valued for who they are. That needs to permeate and get into schools, into communities, into whānau. Yes, this one step in the law was a great direction, but we have all of the work to do from here as well.
Joy, can the downstream legal consequences of this change help polarise support for the Conservative Party? I mean, how much of a field day is Colin Craig going to have from pointing out taxpayer-funded IVF and fertility treatment for gay couples? You know he is going to try and make a lot of hay out of that.
He is, and it will be really interesting to see, with the margin being so large, suggests two things. One, that we probably could have done this a lot earlier, which is a point a friend made to me last night, and I thought, actually, you're right. 77 to 44 is huge. And it's not Parliament pushing at the edge of social change, it's actually social change coming, it's catching up. And the other thing is that hopefully people who are progressively minded will see that margin, think, yeah, I'm not alone, I can hold these views and that's okay, and actually the bigots are in the minority. So I'm hoping, of course Colin Craig is going to make as much out of it as he can. He tweeted this morning saying the day of reckoning is coming. Obviously not today, but sometime.
I'm very disappointed that planes weren't falling from the sky and cats and dogs living together this morning. I thought it was the first page of the apocalypse. But he's got a chance to get over that 5% now, doesn't he?
I don't know if he does, because if you look at the marriage pledge that Family First have done, they've asked people to sign something, and we don't know how many people yet, but I imagine they'll come out with that probably in the next day or two, said that they would not vote for an electorate MP who voted for marriage equality, and they will not give their party vote to a party whose leader voted for marriage equality. Now, that only leaves in the current Parliament Winston. He's the only party leader who didn't vote for it. And Colin Craig is your other option. But I think he's going to have a hard time competing with Winston for those bigot votes. He really is.
Marama, where do we move forward on this? I mean, Native Affairs had a terrible story of how transgendered are still being put in male prisons and the rape culture that creates. What's our next move?
Oh, Martin, it doesn't help when our leader is denying that there is even an issue in
That's
our
right,
prisons
that's
in the
right,
first
that's right,
place. So
that's
we,
right.
we all have to be really strong in giving those stories a platform and a voice. And as someone who was involved in phone communication for over a year with 2 transgender people in prison, in a men's prison who should not have been there, there are a lot of issues. I have to hark again to the Human Rights Commission work on the transgender inquiry. One of the only substantial pieces of work for our transgender community that has happened probably in 20 years. But always the hard part is getting the political buy-in. So it is actually up to people on the ground and to all of us to get in behind that sort of work that seeks to firstly raise awareness of the challenges and then has solid recommendations to put forward.
And what are those recommendations? Where do we need to go for the transgendered community at the moment?
If we just have a look in prisons, for example, and the system of denying not just transgender people, but it affects transgender people, their medication, their steroid medication in prisons, we need to cut that out. We need to just sharply say right now, this is not acceptable. The transgender report clearly talks about some of those issues, and that is just one area where we all need to get in behind.
Now, Antoly says that there is no problem with in terms of rape and transgender people in prison. That, from the little I know of the issue and talking with some of the people involved in that community, it's just a barefaced lie.
I think it's totally unacceptable that we have our leaders in those positions who are so disconnected from reality. That's all I can say to that.
Yeah, and so where do we need to go with that? They surely need to be going into the female prisons, do they not?
There are a whole lot of solutions that have been suggested. If we need to go right back to how does a transgender person identify him or herself? And for me, that is where the kōrero that has come through the transgender inquiry has focused on the right to self-identify.
Is it because we're a little bit uncomfortable with I mean, gender is such an important part of how people self-identify. Is it just an issue that we can't talk about?
Martin, we're stuck in this binary male-female tick box thing. It's a continuum. New Zealanders, we're so behind on this conversation. This is why we are facing trouble in being able to speak to the issues that our transgender whānau face, is because we are stuck in these limiting ideas that do no one any good. It is actually a continuum of gender, and people need to be able to slide along that as they see fit.
Julie, if gay marriage can be debated and it can be won, hallelujah, dare we hope for progress on our ridiculous abortion laws? Is that a place we can go?
I really hope so. Jamie Lee Ross said in his speech last night, and these are probably the only 2 things I agree with Jamie Lee Ross on. He spoke in favour of marriage equality very, very staunchly, and he also said that we had legalised abortion, and we don't.
He was brave, wasn't he? That was very brave for him to say.
A lot of people were tweeting immediately going, actually, that's wrong. And to his credit, he came back and said, yeah, you're right, I did stuff that up, and I would be a conscious vote for that, that he would support decriminalisation. So, and there's a lot of appetite for it, actually. There's been a lot of work happening under the radar a lot on reforming our abortion laws, which are hideously out of date, which were a compromise at the time in 1977, and have just become nonsense.
So effectively, women have to sort of jump through a little loophole of having a mental issue if they go ahead with the pregnancy.
So you have to get permission from 2 other people, basically.
Right.
So what it does is it effectively denies the right of the pregnant person to make their own choice about their body and whether or not they continue their pregnancy. It gives the power to other people.
And we've got situations in the South Island, have we not, where
there's no provision of abortion services in a whole lot of geographic areas.
Which seems bizarre to me, because this is just it's
just another health service.
Yes. And so how have we been able to combat that?
Well, there has been a service set up in Invercargill recently. And they, unfortunately, Right to Life and some of their friends targeted some of the health professionals involved in that, have tried to get the names out of the DHB of who they are. So
which is quite intimidatory, isn't it?
Oh, incredibly. And we're seeing, alongside the fact that there's a real groundswell, particularly amongst feminists, but also more broadly about why don't we just change these laws already? We're unfortunately also seeing a real groundswell in terms of anti-action. And so we've had a nurse at the AMAC clinic, which is just up the road, She had her fuel line cut. We've also had, I've got a couple of friends who are prominent pro-choice activists who've had strange things, not threatening things, but strange things posted to them, like at their day jobs. In fact, there's some strange, weird stuff going on, and I think this is going to be the next big thing.
Which political parties are we going to see some real strength and courage on this from? Because Labour, let's be, have been pretty reticent to get involved, haven't they?
They have been in the past, but I know there are a number of women in their caucus, women in particular, who have been prepared to push this. Charles Chevelle,
Yes.
of course, was
the great
and
leader
he's
on
now
this.
gone.
Yeah.
But Carol's very supportive, who has replaced him. I think the problem is actually going to be, we will have a problem with Labour, but the big problem is actually going to be the Greens.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, John Key claims the GCSB needs to spy on us because someone tried to hack New Zealand for weapons of mass destruction. And what New Zealand WMDs would these be then? The dreaded poison sheep dip, the horrifying nuclear kiwi fruit, or the terrible stealth gumboot? Julie, when should we hand over our civil liberties? And is the threat of WMDs enough?
I think one of the things I've found really interesting has been the number of people who've been really pissed off about the deep sea protest stuff. And a lot of people saying this morning, marriage equality last night, awesome, that rocked, but did you also know earlier in the week we lost this right to protest?
Yeah.
So I think people, the people are starting to wake up and get a bit concerned, people who normally wouldn't be. The GCSB stuff, I just find it absolutely bizarre. It's supposed to be about collecting foreign intelligence.
That's right.
So why does it need, I don't understand why it needs to be able to spy on us. It hasn't needed to in the past. Don't we have other agencies that do that? You know, the police. Don't they have a role there in terms of law enforcement? I just don't understand why anybody would think this is acceptable. In fact, that Winston has said that he's going to vote for it. I just thought shades of Muldoon, you know? It's just that real authoritarian streak coming through. And, you know, people were concerned about light bulbs and shower heads under the last government, but some people seem to be totally fine with giving up some really important civil liberties. And that whole, well, if you've got nothing to fear, then you won't be affected. Well, we don't give more power to the state to police us. We give more power to the state when they're going to work with us in a way that gets a better outcome for everybody.
Marama, the intelligence apparatus of New Zealand really seem to spy on the external threats they use to justify these powers. They tend to spy on left-wing groups, Māori nationalism groups, and the sex lives of Green Party members.
And unionists.
And unionists. Who are the
can't be that
threats
exciting.
to justify these spy bases?
It seems to me that if we take a step back, this legislation and the path it is taking is actually to protect what can come back to our consumer capitalism, our offshore interests. So if we have a look at it along a whole raft of the protest laws, terrorism suppression, surveillance, extending surveillance, actually it is to protect a market. If you have a think about it, if we're going to criminalise any dissent, the dissent that the government is facing is from people who want to protect the environment, is from people who want to protect other groups of people. And I mean, do we even have to talk about tūhui? I'm scared that this law will be used to further trample on the dignity of innocent whānau children, as we saw in Urewera, because of a little whiff of some dissent, and that this is the impact that this sort of legislation will have on our people.
Under these new, under the new regulations, in terms of the economic side of things, activists against the TPPA would come under this. Do you consider Professor Jane Kelsey a threat to New Zealand?
Not really. She used to be my law professor and she was always very approachable.
Is Professor Jane Kelsey a threat to New Zealand?
She would be a threat to the New Zealand under the current definition of what National thinks New Zealand should be heading in.
Yeah.
So yeah, people like her with an amazing critique and analysis will be targeted.
Final question to both of you. The planet was tricked into war to go into Iraq based on weapons of mass destruction. Do you think New Zealanders are going to get as easily spooked into allowing these new powers based on WMDs?
Oh, I hope not. We've had the 2 bombs that have gone off in New Zealand in terror situations. One was the Rainbow Warrior and the other one was Tradeswall targeting unionists. So, you know, it doesn't smell right at all. And what really concerned me about it too was that It was a written statement that he was reading when he said the weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah,
It wasn't
just
one of those
his little brain
blurbs.
farts. That's
Yeah,
right, that's
it
right.
was something
When
he'd
he-
actually written down and thought through, and then still thought this is a good thing to say. So someone must be advising him that it's a good thing to say. So what's going on there?
Are New Zealanders going to be as easily spooked this time round?
Oh gosh, I'm holding some hope for our New Zealanders. The whole thing about WMDs in the first place is, you know, it also draws us away from the obligation on our government to have partnerships and look at the issues of why we might even be looking at terrorism. I mean, this is what America classic. You know, let's bomb them, let's not talk to them. So this focus on the legislation keeps putting a spotlight on terrorism, and takes it away from government obligation to those people.
Let's wrap the show with a final word. Julie, your final word this week is?
I want to speak about something really dull, which is the unitary plan.
Please do.
It's actually not as dull as people might expect. It's about the rules that will govern land that you live on, but also the land your neighbours live on. So it's really important. Have a look at the Shape Auckland website. There's some really good simulators there. We're going to have to fit a lot more people into Auckland, and it's about you having a say in how you think they should fit. If we don't do this, if we don't do it properly, if the community doesn't have a say, then we'll continue to develop the way developers want, and that's not beneficial for communities.
Marama, your final word this week is?
As you know, I'm on the Glen Inquiry panel, which is looking into violence and how our systems deal with it. It would be really lovely. We've got some amazing, generous people coming through with their stories. We're on the streak around the country at the moment to listen to those stories. It would be lovely for people to feel safe in bringing those forward. They're essential for how we go forward with improving our systems.
Thank you, Marama. Thank you, Julie. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. Yesterday, Mana fed over 2,000 kids at the Otara Recreation Centre as part of the lead-up to their Feed the Kids bill due to be discussed in Parliament. To my shock and surprise, not one word from the mainstream media other than a story in the Manukau Courier. The utter silence by the mainstream media is a terrible shame and a real indictment. What other political party has managed to gather 2,000 kids in one place for an event like this? If only we could care about feeding our poorest children as much as we care about marriage equality. Then we would gain some real egalitarianism in New Zealand. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.